"Plastic's fine for her," my dad said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "She's used to cheap stuff." Laughter erupted like a detonated secret. I felt their stares slicing across the dining room, smirks spreading like poison. My aunt clinked her wine glass against porcelain. My cousin Maddie whispered, "Is her husband even real? Or just too broke to show his face?" Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin.
I didn't respond.
I just kept slicing my steak with the flimsy plastic fork they handed me, its tines bending, barely cutting through the meat. I could have walked out. I could have snapped back. But I didn't. Not yet. The long mahogany table stretched before me like a runway of judgment. My sister, Rachel, in her emerald silk dress, rolled her eyes and leaned closer to Dad. Seriously, why did we even invite her? This was supposed to be a classy family brunch. My mother, sitting rigid at the far end, didn't look up. She just sipped her mimosa, her diamond ring glinting under the chandelier. She'd made her choice years ago. Silence. I swallowed the burn building in my throat. "I'm here because Grandma asked me to come," I finally said, my voice calm. "It's her birthday." Grandma Margaret, frail and sweet, sat next to me, gently placing her hand over mine. "And I'm glad you did, sweetheart." But no one else even blinked. Still living in that tiny apartment? My uncle threw in, chuckling, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. Before I could answer, the rumble began. A deep, low sound, growing louder by the second. Glasses rattled. Dishes vibrated. Everyone looked around. "What the hell is that?" someone muttered. Then it happened. The backyard curtains flung open in a gust of wind, and through the wide French doors, a black chopper hovered just feet above the lawn, its blades slicing the air with an electric roar. The family's brunch went dead silent. Everyone stood frozen, squinting toward the helicopter as it descended with military precision. Then the door opened. He stepped out, black suit, dark sunglasses, collar slightly turned from the wind. And when he walked toward the house, the guards in navy followed behind, flanking him like shadows. The moment his shoes hit the patio stone, my father took a step back. My husband. My silent, absent, too broke to show up husband. He walked in, no hesitation, no apology. His gaze scanned the room once. He stopped at me. Without a word, he walked up, leaned down, and kissed my forehead gently. "You ready to leave the circus?" My chest tightened. I stood, still holding the plastic fork. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm ready." The table was still. Rachel's mouth parted in disbelief. My uncle dropped his fork. Maddie's wine glass slipped from her hand and hit the rug with a dull thud. "You married him?" my father croaked, his voice dry. My husband turned to him, expression unreadable. "You're welcome for not charging your family with trespassing when they showed up at my event center last spring and didn't even know who it belonged to." The color drained from Dad's face. We walked past them, slow, deliberate steps. I didn't need to say anything more. But just before I stepped outside, I turned back and placed the bent plastic fork gently on the table. "Thanks for lunch." And we left. The helicopter blades still roared behind us as we stepped onto the lawn, but I barely noticed. My pulse was louder. My husband, Drew Anderson, slid his hand into mine, as if anchoring me in place. As if to say, "You did good." And for the first time in years, I felt weight lift off my shoulders, not just from that brunch, but from every belittling comment, every eye roll, every time they laughed behind my back and thought I didn't hear. As we walked toward the chopper, I glanced back at the house. Through the glass doors, I could see them still standing at the table. Still frozen. Still trying to figure out how the girl with the plastic fork was flying off in a private helicopter with the man they all assumed was invisible, or imaginary. And Dad. He looked like he'd swallowed a live battery. The chopper took us just 10 minutes outside the city before touching down again, on a rooftop. "Where are we?" I asked, brushing my windblown hair from my face as Drew helped me out. He grinned. Home. I blinked. What? He walked me to the edge of the helipad. Below us was a luxury penthouse, glass walls, rooftop pool, and panoramic views of the skyline. I was going to wait to show you, he said, reaching into his coat. But after today, he handed me a small, navy folder. I opened it. Deed of ownership. Our names. My name. Together. You bought it? I whispered. He nodded. Last week. Signed everything yesterday. I just stared at him. He smiled, running his thumb along my cheek. No more plastic forks. We stepped inside, and the warmth of the place hit me like a second kind of sunlight. It wasn't just expensive, it was beautiful, thoughtful, filled with love and quiet luxury. On the marble kitchen counter sat a cake with white frosting and silver lettering. To my wife, Happy Freedom Day. I didn't realize I was crying until Drew wrapped his arms around me from behind. I know today wasn't easy, he said quietly. I know you wanted to prove them wrong. But you don't have to prove anything to anyone. I wasn't trying to prove anything, I said, voice tight. I just wanted to sit at that table and not be treated like a stray. He turned me around. You're not. You've never been. I nodded, biting my lip. Then I pulled out my phone. Back at my parents' house, the group text was already blowing up. My cousin was the first to break the silence. Maddie, so, that's your husband? Rachel, he didn't look that tall in your wedding photos. Uncle Mike, wait, isn't that the guy who bought out Highland Towers last year? Then came the cherry on top. Dad, you should have told us. We didn't know. Come back inside. Let's talk. I stared at that message for a full minute. Drew glanced over and read it too. Wow. Took him less than 30 minutes to go from mockery to negotiation. I laughed, sharp, bitter. I typed one line. Me, I didn't marry him to impress you. I married him because he saw me when none of you did. No one replied after that. Later that night, Drew and I curled up on the rooftop patio, the city lights below us like a reflection of the stars above. I can't believe the look on your dad's face, Drew murmured, chuckling softly. I can, I said. He's always had this idea of success, of what a real family looks like, and I never fit into it. Well, Drew said, reaching for my hand again. He's going to have to make peace with the fact that you're not just successful, you're unstoppable. I looked at him. He wasn't just some fantasy billionaire sweeping in to fix my life. He was the man who held me at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep from anxiety. The man who stood back and let me fight my own battles, but never let me feel alone. And, today, I saw in his silence something more powerful than all their noise. Support. Love. Respect. The next morning, I woke to a knock on the door. Drew was still asleep, so I tiptoed out and opened it. It was my father, wearing yesterday's jacket. No driver. No entourage. Just him. I didn't know, he said, his voice hoarse. I didn't know he was that man. I folded my arms. So, if he wasn't, I asked, I'd still be the girl with the plastic fork? He didn't answer. I raised you better than this, he finally said. No, Dad, I said, my voice steady. You raised me to believe that money equals worth, that I was less because I wasn't flashy. But the truth is, I never needed wealth to be enough. I just needed to stop needing your approval. He blinked. You should go. He hesitated, then turned and walked away. And I closed the door. Not just the physical one, but the emotional one. That chapter? Closed. Later that afternoon, I found myself staring at the rooftop pool, sunlight dancing on the surface like nothing had ever gone wrong. But inside me, a war was finally over. Drew came up behind me, resting his hands on my shoulders. You okay? I nodded slowly. I think for the first time in a long time, I actually am. He turned me around, brushing my hair behind my ear. You handled your father like a queen. I gave a tired smile. I didn't want it to come to that. But maybe it had to. We sat down on the cushioned lounge chairs, sipping iced tea, while the wind stirred the curtains behind us. It was quiet, freeing, a kind of silence that didn't feel like judgment, just calm. And then my phone buzzed again. Rachel, can we talk? I was out of line yesterday. Mom, your father didn't mean to hurt you. He just didn't know. Uncle Mike, we all misjudged. You've done well. Truly. I locked the phone. Drew raised an eyebrow. What did they say? The usual, I said, voice flat. Half apologies. Excuses dressed up as regret. He nodded. Are you going to respond? No, I said. They didn't reach out when I needed kindness. They only reached out when they felt embarrassed. And that was the truth. They hadn't apologized because they understood. They apologized because they lost. That evening, Drew and I got dressed for a formal charity gala. One of his companies was hosting it downtown. As we stepped out of the elevator in the lobby, a valet rushed over with a bouquet in hand. For Mrs. Anderson, he said. I looked at Drew. Another surprise? He looked genuinely confused. Not from me. I opened the card. It was from my grandmother. You didn't say a word yesterday, but your presence said everything. You've become the kind of woman I always knew you'd be. Graceful, powerful, unbothered. Love you forever, Grandma. Tears stung my eyes. Drew reached for my hand. Let's make an entrance tonight, he said with a grin. And we did. The gala was held in a massive glass ballroom overlooking the city. Chandeliers sparkled like stars above. Photographers lined the red carpet, calling names, snapping photos. As we stepped onto the carpet, the flashes came in waves. Mr. Anderson, who's your guest? Drew smiled and wrapped an arm around my waist. Not a guest. My wife. The cameras clicked faster. The murmurs grew louder. She's the one they were talking about, someone whispered. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I owned that moment. We walked in, heads high, and I swear I saw at least two people who'd once laughed at me when I was waitressing during college, now wearing stiff smiles and pretending not to notice me. That was fine. I wasn't there for them. At the table, Drew introduced me to 3 board members and 2 CEOs. I spoke with ease, confidence. They listened, asked my opinion. Not once did I feel like the girl who didn't belong. And as the evening went on, my phone buzzed again. Dad, saw you on TV just now. Your mother cried. I didn't reply. Not because I hated them, but because I didn't owe them access to my peace anymore. They had front row seats to my struggle, and chose to look away. Now that I'd stepped into the light, they wanted to sit beside me. But I'd built this life without them, and I was going to live it on my terms. Back home, as we walked barefoot through the penthouse, Drew turned to me. You've been quiet. I've been thinking. About. I met his gaze. How different my life used to be, and how I kept waiting for them to validate me. I think I gave too much power to people who never really saw me. He nodded. You're not that woman anymore. No, I said. I'm not. And it felt so good to finally say that. I wasn't the daughter with the cheap shoes. I wasn't the girl whose family rolled their eyes behind her back. I wasn't the punchline to their dinner conversations. I was me. And I was finally enough, without asking for permission. A week later, I received a formal invitation in the mail. Family dinner, reconciliation night. Hosted by Mom and Dad. Please come. I stood by the trash can, staring at the envelope. Drew came into the kitchen, drying his hands with a towel. You gonna go? I held the invitation up. What do you think? He tilted his head. What do you want? I looked at it one last time, then dropped it straight into the bin. I want peace. He smiled, proud. And I realized something. Closure isn't about hearing, I'm sorry. It's about realizing you don't need to be part of the same cycle anymore. The following Saturday, the skies were unusually clear. Warm sunlight spilled across the penthouse floor, and for once, my mind wasn't racing with old thoughts of proving myself, of being enough, of winning their approval. I was already winning, just by living in peace. But then something happened. As Drew and I were finishing brunch on the balcony, his phone rang. He frowned at the screen and handed it to me. It's your mom. My stomach tensed. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. Hello. A soft voice crackled on the line.
Hi, sweetheart.
I know you don't owe us anything, but your father hasn't been himself since the brunch. He doesn't say it, but I know he regrets what he said. I didn't speak. He wants to apologize.
Properly.
He's planning something. Would you consider coming? I took a breath. Why now? Her voice broke a little. Because he saw the world recognize you before he ever did. And it's eating him alive. For a moment, I looked over at Drew. He gave a small, supportive nod. Whatever I chose, he had my back. I sighed. If I come, I'm not coming for a speech. I'm not coming to be praised. I'm coming as me. No filters. No fake smiles. If they can't handle that, I walk. That's fair, she said quietly. 3 days later, I stood at the same doorstep where I was once handed a plastic fork and laughed at like I was nothing. But this time, I didn't come quietly. I stepped out of a black car. Alone. No chopper. No guards. Just me, and that was enough. As I walked up the stairs, the door opened. It was Dad. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not in size, but in presence. His eyes were tired. His shoulders didn't carry that same intimidating pride they once did. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure either. We stood there for a second, the air thick between us. Then, he did something I'd never seen from him in my entire life. He stepped back and opened the door. Inside, the dining table was set again, but simpler. No fancy plates. No place cards. No crystal glasses. Just family. Just quiet. Grandma was seated in the middle, and when she saw me, her face lit up. There she is. Rachel stood beside the fireplace, clearly uncomfortable, hands clasped like a nervous bridesmaid. Maddie avoided my eyes. Mom stood at the far end, silently watching. Dad cleared his throat. Before we eat, I just want to say something. Everyone looked at him. He looked at me. I was wrong, he began. I judged you. I mocked you. And I did it in front of the people you love. There's no excuse for it. I raised an eyebrow. Why now? He hesitated. Because when the helicopter landed and your husband walked in, I realized I wasn't the strongest man in the room anymore. Silence. He continued. But it wasn't the money. It wasn't the suit or the guards. It was how he looked at you. Like you were worth more than everything in that room combined. I felt my throat tighten. And it hit me, he said, voice faltering. You were always worth that. I was just too blind to see it. No one moved. Even Rachel lowered her gaze. Grandma smiled softly. I spoke calm and even. You didn't just judge me. You made it your hobby. You let everyone laugh. You taught them to. I know, he said. And I don't expect forgiveness. But I'm asking for a chance to be better. I nodded once. Then start by treating the next girl who walks through this door like she matters, even if she's holding a plastic fork. He looked down, ashamed. We sat. It wasn't warm. It wasn't suddenly perfect. But it was honest. And that was more than I'd ever gotten. After dinner, Grandma pulled me aside and placed a small box in my hand. This was your great-grandmother's, she said. She built her life from scratch, just like you. Inside was a gold locket. Simple. Beautiful. Engraved inside. Strength doesn't yell. It stands. I hugged her. Harder than I had in years. You've always stood my girl, she whispered. Even when they tried to make you kneel. Back at the penthouse, I sat by the window with Drew, sipping tea. He watched me. Was it worth going? I nodded. Not for them. For me. I needed to say those things out loud. To close the chapter the right way. He kissed my temple. So, what now? I looked out at the lights of the city. At the life I'd built. The peace I'd found.
Now.
I smiled. Now I live.
Loudly. Boldly.
Without apologizing. Because once upon a time, they gave me a plastic fork and laughed.
But now?
Now, I own the table.